Welcome to One Piece TCG 101. The purpose of this video is to teach the basics of the One Piece card game. What is the One Piece card game? The One Piece card game is a game played with two players that construct a deck of 50 cards each, built around a leader card. Each player will start with their leader card out, and at the start of the game, you'll put out life cards equal to the life on the leader card face down. We'll get to that later. The objective of the game is to attack your opponent's leader until they have 0 life, then hit them one final time successfully to win the game. So, what is a leader card? I give you Monkey D. Luffy, the premier leader card from Starter Deck 1. You'll see some numbers on this card that dictate some important things that affect the game. First, we have the leader's life. Here we can see a life stat of 5 in the bottom right corner, and that is the number of cards we place from the top of our deck into the life zone. We then have a leader's power. This is used for combat. We'll get into how combat works later, but just know that 5,000 is pretty standard for a leader card. We also have a type and color below here. So this color is red in this case, and the color wheel below dictates what color it is, not the actual color of the background. Sometimes you can have an alternate art leader that will have a wild background and you can't really tell what color it is. The color wheel is the true value. And that dictates what color of cards we can play in our deck. In the case of Luffy, we can only play red. But in the case of Pudding, she has 2 colors down there. She can play either yellow or purple, so she is special. But the cost, you can see, causes her to have only 4 life, since she has effectively double the card pool to be able to pull from. You can also see in the middle there that that leaders can have different types of effects that will have different keywords. And these are basically just you do what they say. They'll tell you when to do it, in this case, when attacking, and then you just do whatever it says to do. In this case, it says you may turn the top 2 life cards of your life face up, add 1 Dawn from your Dawn deck as rested. Simple enough. You might not know what that means yet, but you will by the end of this video. And then lastly, we have this little type at the bottom. In this example, it says Big Mom Pirates, but this doesn't come up a ton, but every now and then there are cards that are what are known as leader locked, where the type of the leader determines if the character's effects or event effects or stage events can be used. So yeah. How do we build this deck? Well, a deck, as I said before, consists of exactly 50 cards. Cards in the deck must match at least 1 color of your leader, and card types include either characters, which are the units you play onto the board at any time during your turn. You can play down a character, attack with your leader, play down another character, etc. It is worth noting that you're not able to attack on the turn a character is played to the board. Events, these are cards that can be played directly from your hand and use their effects. So it goes from your hand to your trash, and you just do whatever the card says. Then there are stages. Stages have a special place on the board where they go. They stay until you play another stage, or if there's another card that interacts with that stage to move it. Character cards. So this is an example of a character. This is Jinbei. He has a power stat similar to our leaders, and in this case it's 5,000, so that's exactly the same as our Luffy. They also have a color. Color determines whether or not they are able to be played in a deck, because if the leader does not have blue in their type or in their color wheel, then we are unable to play it. They also can have effects. They don't need to have effects, but they can. In this case, we have an on-play effect, which are some of the most powerful types of effects because they happen as soon as you play the card down. They also have a cost. So unlike leaders are just there from the start of the game. To get a character onto your board, you need to pay Dawn in what is called cost. In this case, it is 4. So you would need to have 4 active Dawn that you're able to rest or turn sideways in order to play this card onto the board. They also can they don't have to have, they might have a counter value. And counter, as of right now, is only 1,000 or 2,000. Who knows, they might invent a 3,000 counter character at some point in the future, but right now it is 1 or 2. This is another example of a character card. You can see the cost is now 10, its power is 10,000, it's a different color, it has no counter value, and it has a different effect. Here is an Otama. She has 1 cost to play out, 0 power, a different type of on-play effect, and 2,000 counter. And then here is Basil Hawkins, who has no effect, but has counter and high power and a different cost. So all of these stats are used to kind of balance out the value of the cards. Here's another character who has a different line. We can see at the bottom there, this trigger. Now, a character doesn't have to have trigger. None of the other characters we looked at had trigger. But all cards can have a trigger, including the next couple. And a trigger effect means whenever you take damage as a leader, you look at that top life card before you put it in your hand. If that card has a trigger, you can use the trigger effect. You don't always want to use it, and you don't always have to use it. If you don't want to use it, you just add the card to your hand as normal. But if you want to use it, that's when it happens. Next, we'll look at event cards. Here we have an example of an event card. They also have a cost just like characters, and this is the same for events as it is for characters. In order to play the card, you have to rest that number of Dawn. Then they have an effect. You just do whatever the effect says. In this case, you draw a card. After this, if your trash has more than 10 cards in it, give up to one of your opponent's characters minus 3 cost for the turn. Now, this can be used because there are some effects that only work on characters below a certain cost. So this makes them temporarily lower in cost so that you can use effects to like remove them or rest them or whatever. They also might have a trigger just like a character. In this case, the trigger is to KO up to one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 3 or less. Stages are the final type of card. They look something like this. They also have a cost to play out onto the board. They also have an effect, and they also might have a trigger. The only difference between a stage and an event is a stage gets played to the board. It usually has like an activate once per turn or like an activate main in this case. And it's something that can be used over and over again because it stays there until you play a different stage. Whereas a event, it gets played, it goes immediately to trash, so you don't really get any recurring value. But the balance is usually stages are a little bit weaker. In this case, we have a 2-cost stage, activate main, rest the stage if your leader has CP in the type, so that is a place where the type comes up. Give up to one of your opponent's characters minus 2 costs during the turn, and then the trigger is just to play this card onto the board. We have a second deck. So there's the main deck that consists of all the characters that are based on your color. Then we have a Dawn deck. A Dawn deck is exactly 10 cards. They're always the exact same cards, except for they might have different art. So this is like the basic Dawn card. They can also look like these. The purpose of these lovely cards are twofold. One, they are the card that we use to determine how much Dawn, how many resources we have to play out cards. So, for example, if we want to play a 4-cost card, we need to have 4 face-up or face-up active Dawn, which just means upright position. Then we would need to rest 4 Dawn to play a 4-cost card. They have a second effect. You can see at the bottom, they all say your turn plus 1,000. You can take an active Dawn and place it under a character and boost their power by 1,000 for every Dawn card you put under them. However, since you're using active Dawn to do this boosting, that takes away from the amount of Dawn you have to use cards and play them out. That is the balance. With that, I think you have all of the basic information needed. So let's look at how to set up a game of One Piece. Okay, so now we're in the IRL view. You can see that we kind of have this broken down into 3 parts. We have our leader card here. We have our Dawn deck. This, again, we have different artworks in here, but these are all the same thing. They're just Dawn. This is what we use for resources. Then we have our deck. This is a constructed deck of 50 red cards because our leader only has red. And specifically, this is starter deck 1. So whenever we're starting a game, we start by taking our Dawn deck, placing all 10 face down over here. We'll then shuffle our deck, shuffle, 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 boom, boom, boom. And then we will sit, once we've shuffled, we let our opponent cut. They'll just usually do something like that. They might tap it, say no cut, whatever. Then we take the top 5 cards, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that is our first hand. Now you're allowed to look at your first hand and you can say, oh, I don't like these cards. How you know that, that's a much more advanced concept. I'll make a video on that later. That's a whole separate topic. But for demonstration purposes, let's say I don't like my hand. Okay, well then you say I want a mulligan. Okay, if you mulligan, you shuffle, 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 blah, 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 shuffle, shuffle, shuffle. Give it back to my opponent to cut the deck again. You're only allowed 1 mulligan. So this time I have to keep. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We can look. This is my hand. And you don't show this to anybody, obviously, but we're going to just put this here for demonstration purposes. My leader goes smack dab in the middle of the board. Up here is where characters will eventually get played to. And since we have my hand, we've decided to keep it. If we decide to keep the first hand, we do this next part as soon as we decide to say, oh, I keep my hand. We're going to look at the life on our leader, and we're going to place that number of life cards over here in the life zone. So that will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because our leader has 5 life. So that is the basic setup. And then for our turn 1, if we're going first, which you determine by a dice roll, usually you'll do either high roll, low roll, or odd even with a dice roll. And then the person that wins the dice roll gets to choose if they want to go first or second. Some decks want to go first, some decks want to go second. It all depends. But whoever goes first starts with 1 Dawn, and they do not get to draw a card on your first turn. If you go second, you get to draw a card on your first turn, and then you get 2 Dawn. So that is the basics of how to set up the game. Next, we'll go into the game flow. Game flow. What can we do each turn? Well, at the start of the turn, we're going to go through what is known as the refresh phase. All Dawn characters and stage, if they exist, and if they are rested, they will go from rested to the active position. This is important because that means if you spent Dawn on your previous turn, all that Dawn becomes usable again on the next turn. Then you will draw a card. You'll take 1 card from the top of the deck and add it to your hand so that you have an additional card to play with. You will then add additional Dawn. Each turn, you can add up to 2 Dawn from your Dawn deck. Now, I say up to 2 because there are some situations where you'll be at 9, your max is 10, so you can only add 1. But in all other circumstances, you'll be adding 2 each turn. This is important to know because that means that you can map out what you can do on your next turn, because you'll know, oh, next turn I'll have this many Dawn, and then the next turn this many. And every turn, your Dawn all becomes refreshed, so you can spend it all and then have more next turn. After the start of your turn is done, you enter in what is called main. During main, you can do basically anything in any order. You can play cards, which just means pay the cost on the card to play out a character, use an event effect, or play out a stage card. You can declare attacks on rested characters or leaders. It's important to note that declaration of attacks can only be made on rested characters or on leader cards. Leaders do not have to be rested. You cannot just protect your leader by not ever swinging with your leader. This is, it's important to note that you can do either of these in any stage. So you can play an event, play character, declare attacks. You can declare attacks, then play characters. Order does not matter here. And then we enter into the end of turn. End of turn, you just declare, I pass my turn. And then if there are effects that say end of turn, you are going to be able to use those at this point. So you say, I pass my turn. Then you say end of turn effect, and then declare all the effects that have to resolve. Those resolve, then your opponent starts their turn, and then they go through the refresh stage, the draw, the add dawn, the main, and then they end their turn and back and forth. And the whole objective is to build up characters that give you board advantage and more swings to be able to clear out either their board and their characters, or be able to be used to attack their leader directly. And one more piece of miscellaneous information here. I just wanted to be able to note down some very popular key types and types of effects in general. So here we have Roanoa Zoro. Zoro is keyword rush, which means it's able to attack on the turn it is played. That's very valuable because most cards have to stick to the board for a turn before they can start declaring attacks. Being able to rush means that you're able to immediately get value out of the card before anything else happens. This card has the keyword banish, which means instead of a life card going to the player's hand if they take damage, banish makes it go directly to the trash. So that can be very devastating in a game where card advantage and counter is very important. You might be relying on that card being counter, and this one just says, oh, nope, it goes straight to the trash. Double attack. Double attack means that this card will deal 2 damage instead of 1. So if this card makes a successful attack on a leader, that leader will have to take 2 damage, meaning they're taking 2 cards from their life and adding it to their hand. It's also worth noting, if both of those cards are triggered, both can be triggered as well. Then we have blocker. Blocker means that whenever your opponent declares an attack to a card, a blocker that is currently active, that's important to note, can be rested and turned sideways in order to redirect the attack to them. So this allows you to protect your leader, protect important cards on your board that you need for combos, and just compete really good. So those are like our main key types, keyword types. And then we also have like effect types. So like there's an activate main. That just means you can activate it anytime during the main step. There's on play effects, such as Brook on play. This is probably the most common type of effect you'll see. In this case, it's on play, add 2 rested Dawn to one of your characters. Then we have Dawn X effects. So these, instead of paying Dawn to activate the effect, you attach Dawn underneath the character. And this one's a very simple one. Just Dawn X1, so 1 Dawn under the character gains an additional 1,000 power. So since having a Dawn under your character during your turn gives you plus 1,000, this effect would give you another plus 1,000, meaning that 1 Dawn under it makes it a 7,000 power card during your turn, and then during your opponent's turn, it would just have the plus 1,000 from the Dawn X1 effect. Then we have some cards that will have when attacking effects. In this case, we have 2 effects. We have a on play effect, draw a card, and then a when attacking effect, where when attacking, you can make one of your opponent's characters have -4 cost during their turn, which is a very strong effect. We then also have some that have the opponent's turn keyword. So they'll have an effect that's only active on the opponent's turn. In the case of Borsellino, during your opponent's turn, the card cannot be KO'd by effects. And it also gains 1,000 power, which can be huge for a blocker card. Then we have on KO effects, such as this one, which is a conditional on KO effect, where if this card is KO'd, which means by battle or card effect, and your opponent's life is 3 or less, then you're able to take the top card of your deck and place it to the top of your life. So you're basically able to heal a life just for having this card knocked out, which is very annoying. Just wanted to go over some like basic effects and how they interact and what these keywords mean. The cards tell you exactly how to perform these actions, but just to make it crystal clear. Most importantly, there is the battle steps. How do we do battle in this game? That's the most important aspect of the One Piece card game, most likely. And yeah, we're going to get right into it. How does battle work? Well, first, whoever is the current turn player, they can choose to boost their characters or their leader by attaching Active Dawn and or using card effects to boost their power. Once the current player has that power to a point where they think it's good, they can then declare an attack on one of the rested characters of their opponent or the leader. It's important to note you can only attack rested characters, or leaders can be attacked while the leader is active or rested. The defending player will then go through 3 steps. Step 1 is the blocker step. At the blocker step, they can choose to redirect the attack to a blocker by turning a blocker that is currently active sideways. If you don't want to use a blocker, even if you have blocker available, you don't have to use it, you will just say no blocker. If you want to block, you would just turn the blocker sideways. In either case, after that decision is made, you will immediately go into the counter step. The counter step is a state of the battle where the defending player has an opportunity to discard any number of cards in their hand with counter to boost the defending character or leader for this current battle. It will only last for this one attack. So it's important to note if your opponent has like 5 swings that could be coming next and you only have 2 cards in hand, it's not worth discarding those 2 cards to protect them this one time because it'll go away anyway. After you have gone through the counter step, which can include 0 counter, you don't have to counter, you go into the damage step. In the damage step, if the power of the defending character or leader is equal to or less than the attacking character or leader, after the counter step, you will take damage. If your power is higher after the counter step, then nothing happens. So it's important to note the attacking player can boost their character before they declare an attack, but they have no control, no boosting potential after they've already made the attack. So when you get into the defending player's steps here, you have all of the information you need to know whether or not you want to use counter for this attack. You would then go through the counter step where you can boost your defending character. If you do still take damage, so you decided not to counter out, then there is two states here. If a character takes damage, they go to the trash, and if they have an on-KO effect, it will activate. If a leader takes damage, they will take a life card, and if they have 0 life when they take damage, the defending player will lose the game. So that is the whole crux of the game. That is the objective of the game. You're going to be performing these battle stages over and over again. You want to get a lot of characters on the board so you're able to more effectively attack their leader, burn down their life. The defending player, the other player, is going to be wanting to keep their cards in hand fairly high so they have counter to defend their characters, to defend their life, and then be able to pressure you. And the whole game is a game of resources that's trying to go back and forth on these battle steps. I hope that makes sense. If not, we're about to illustrate a game right now, so I will see you in the sim. All right, so since I have no friends, we're going to be playing ourselves, and also this allows for a very simplified game state where you're able to see everything that's happening at the same time. So for player 1 here will be the Straw Hat Starter Deck 1, and for player 2 will be the Animal Kingdom Starter Deck 4. So we'll go ahead and start here. So first, with the interface of the sim here, we get to do the player 1 actions, and then we'll do the player 2 actions next. So we're looking at player 1's hand, and player 1 will be going first. So for turn 1, we could establish a Nami right away, which seems pretty strong because that means that every turn we get to give up to 2 Rested Dawn to things because our leader gives a Rested Dawn, Nami gives Rested Dawn. Our turn 2 could be something like Sanji, and we can give Sanji 2 Rested Dawn in order to give it Rush and then be able to swing 2 6s, which seems kind of good. So we have some things to do. We then have some big vanillas, which are kind of good in this format. I think we keep on the Luffy side. So since we decided to keep that hand, we immediately put out our life cards. So you can see our life over here, our Dawn deck's here, our main deck's here, our leader's here. This is the character area, cost area, trash, and stage goes there. In the Kaido side here, we see that we have Onigashima, and that's really the only card we have that seems good. But that might be good enough to carry us because this is an incredibly strong card. It allows us to gain Dawn faster. But the other cards we have are really bad. I think we actually mulligan here. We mulliganed and we do not see the island. Oh well, it'll be fine. We'll work it out. So as Luffy, we only have one Dawn since we are going first and we did not get to draw a card. You can see here I can end my turn without doing any actions whatsoever. And you cannot attack on your first turn, so we can't do that. Our only play here is to really play down our Nami, and then we can pass turn. So now we're on to the Kaido's turn. They will start by drawing a card because there was nothing rested to refresh. We then draw our Dawn. We get to start with 2 Dawn. And our only play is to play this lovely Black Maria that has the keyword blocker. So that's kind of good to establish because that means we can block a hit. And now the Kaido will end turn. So now this is the first turn that we could potentially attack. And we have a card that has a conditional rush where if we have Dawn X2, the card gains rush, which means it can attack the turn it's played. So we'll go ahead and play that down for 2. You can see that we rested 2 Dawn down here. And we have these activate mains where the Nami can attach a rested Dawn and the Luffy can attach a rested Dawn. So we give it 2 rested Dawn between these 2 effects. And now we're able to attack for 6 into their leader directly. So now the leader, the Kaido side, goes into the defensive. So first we have the blocker step. We can either choose to block with our Black Maria here, or we can choose no blocker. And since we're still very early in the game, I think it makes sense to go no blocker. And we take the card. There's no trigger on it, so no trigger effect. And now we're back to the turn player. So Luffy can still make an attack. We can either attach 1 card to Luffy and then swing for 6 again, or we can swing for 5 and then play out a Karu. I think we'll go ahead and swing for 5 and then play out a Karu. So now we're back to the Kaido. Kaido's not going to want to waste a blocker on this, but we might want to give him a 1k counter. So we'll boost to 6 by discarding a counter. And now that Kaido is at 6, we are now safe from this attack, so nothing happens. We'll then play down that Karu, and then we can end turn. Now on the Kaido side, Kaido draws a card, and it's a X Drake, which is a 3/5 card with no effect. But that seems pretty decent right now. Our options are to either go straight for this or try to play this this card, which will ramp another Dawn and draw a card. I think what we want to do right now is probably just go ahead and draw a card. Hopefully we get something good. This is not the best card, but we'll play it down anyway. And then with our leader, we'll attack into this character because we don't want to keep giving them the ability to swing with so many characters. From our side, we would have to give up 2 cards, or both of our Frankies, just to protect this Sanji. So we'll probably just let the Sanji die. Kaido is all out of Dawn and has no other attacks that it can make, so it'll end turn. And now we're back to our Luffy side. So for Luffy, we probably want to immediately play down a Frankie because it's a 6,000 power vanilla card that's able to attack into his leader pretty well. And then now we have Rested Dawn that we can use our effects from Nami and our effect from our leader to give Karu 2 Rested Dawn and make an attack for 5,000 into their leader. 5,000 attack is not too scary, so Kaido is probably going to just counter out with another 1k counter, like so. Now Kaido can resolve the attack, no problem. Next, Luffy will swing for 6 by attaching one more Dawn. And Kaido does not have any 2k counters in hand and still doesn't want to use that blocker yet because he sees a 6,000 power card that might want to swing heavier next turn. So Kaido takes the card in search for a better card. He gets a stage off of it, which is really good. And Luffy ends turn. So now it's Kaido's turn. He draws for the turn. Everything refreshed, drew for turn, and then draws the Dawn. And it's up to 7 Dawn now. So he can go first, swings 3,000 into Karu. Probably don't want to discard our last counter for protecting a 3,000 body that he could swing 5 into next. So we'll let it go. Next, he can play down Onigashima, which has a stage that has the effect of resting the stage. If your leader has Animal Kingdom Pirates, you can add a Dawn card from your deck by resting this card once per turn, which is a very strong effect because now Kaido is already up to 8 and will be on this 10 Dawn turn next turn, while Luffy is still only at 5 Dawn and going into 7 next turn. From there, you can play down the Vanilla X-Drake and then finish it with a 6,000 swing to Luffy's life. Luffy only has 1k counter and cannot defend against this hit, so the attack will go through. And with that, Kaido is all tapped out, has no more actions that he can make, so he'll end turn. So now Luffy refreshes. Everything that was sideways goes face up, draws a card for the turn, and draws an additional Dawn. Now we can play down. First, we can just swing 5 into 3,000 to get rid of this body. And Kaido has no reason to protect a small body at this stage of the game. Next, we can attach 1 Dawn to our Frankie to be able to swing 7,000. Kaido's looking at this and does not want to discard his whole hand, but he sees this blocker and 2 rested characters, so he'll go ahead and give him Black Maria to be able to defend that attack. And Black Maria is a cheap blocker, so he'll just let it go. Next, the Luffy will play down a character Luffy for 5 Dawn. Luffy has an extra effect, Rush, and then a Dawn X2 when attacking effect where they cannot activate blockers during this battle. So we can go ahead and give him the rested Dawn from the other characters, as well as play down this Nami and give another rested Dawn, making it a 9,000 power attack. Kaido has no way of being able to counter out of this, so he will have to take the attack. And no trigger. Luffy's all tapped out, has no further actions to make, so he'll pass turn. Kaido has a few options here. First, he can swing into a Frankie here for 6,000. It doesn't seem like we'll really be able to protect it, so Kaido's attack will probably go through. Luffy decides to let it go through. He then has 9 Dawn left, which means he can play down the 9 cost Kaido. 9 cost Kaido has a on play effect with a special condition, Dawn -5, which means you return the specified number of Dawn from your Dawn area to the Dawn deck and then activate the effect. And in this case, the effect KOs a opponent's character with a cost of 6 or less, and this card can attack the turn it is played, which is a pretty strong effect. So we can use this card action, returning 5 rested Dawn, to then KO the Luffy by this card effect. And then we get Rush, which means we can attack this turn. But first we'll attack with our smaller body, and we still can't really counter out of that. We do see a trigger. The trigger is to play this card, but this card does not really do much for us being on the board. Then he can swing 10,000 into us, and that will give us another card because we cannot counter out of that. and no trigger. Lastly, he's all tapped out, but he can still activate the stage to gain Arrested Dawn, putting him back to 6, so he'll go to 8 Dawn next turn. And Kaido can end the turn. Now, Luffy is kind of behind at this point. He just drew a Sanji, though, which means we might be able to try to go for game if we were being really crazy, because Sanji costs 2. Luffy cost 5, so that's 7, and then we have 3 Rested Dawn that we can give them, and then that'd be 2 more that we can give someone. So we can try going first a 6k swing at the leader. And Kaido is not seeing too much of a threat here, so Kaido can probably take 1 hit. Then we'll play down the Sanji and give Rested Dawn using our Nami effects, giving him Rush, meaning that Sanji can swing for another 6k swing. At this point, Kaido thinks that the Luffy is probably just going to lose, so he takes the hit. No counter, or no trigger. And at this point, Kaido has a very, very large hand. Luffy will then play down the Luffy and give it Arrested Dawn plus 1 more, being able to swing for 8. And Kaido doesn't have a blocker, and even if he did, he couldn't block, but he has plenty of counter in hand to go up to 9 and resolve the attack with nothing happening. Now, Luffy is all tapped out, has no more plays he can make, and passes turn. Before anything else, Kaido is looking at the board state and thinks that he can go for game. He starts off with giving Drake 2 Dawn to be able to swing for 7. Luffy is barely able to counter out of this by discarding 3 cards from hand, but he sees that the Kaido only has 2 more attacks and takes the hit. Kaido can then use his effect, activate main once per turn, Dawn -7, to get rid of the last life by trashing it. So he'll activate this effect, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that trashes the last life. Island can be rested to give us another Rested Dawn. We could have done that a little bit better to have Kaido with 7 swing here, but we'll go 6. Luffy needs to counter out of this or he loses. Resolve. And then the final 10k Kaido will swing. Luffy only has enough counter to go to 7, and the final attack will go through, so Luffy will lose the game. So I hope that walkthrough of a game really clarifies things for you. And yeah, I'll just wrap things up. So there you have it. Thank you for completing One Piece TCG 101. If you like this format for learning how to play the game, I plan on doing a lot more and just going further and further into more complex issues over time. I also plan on doing like specific deck breakdowns and master classes on ones that I feel like I do have that higher level of knowledge on. And yeah, so please subscribe for more content, and see you guys later, hopefully. Bye.